Hi, I'm Nathan Wildman. I'll be teaching the logic class to you this year. What I wanted to do with this little video is basically just walk you through some overview parts of the course, introduce you to how we'll be doing the assessment, and talk very briefly about the kind of topics we'll be covering. Let's dive in. So the first thing to start with is the course learning goals. I'm not going to bother reading these all to you. I'll just sort of give you a summary. The basic idea with this course is kind of two halves. The first half of the course is focused entirely on what we call formal logic. This is really some tools that philosophers, linguists, mathematicians have developed to help us really hone our reasoning. So what we'll be doing is learning two formal languages. These are specifically kind of ways of re-expressing or capturing sentences that make kind of logical structure and logical consequences clearer. So the first 7 weeks of the course, and actually everything leading up to the midterm, is going to be on these two formal languages. The first one is truth functional logic. It's also called sentential or propositional logic. And we'll kind of start with that. That'll be what we'll work on for the first few weeks. And then we'll pivot to first order logic. This is also known as predicate logic. Basically, this just gives us a bit more in terms of ability to say things, specify things. It's more complicated, and it builds on what we've learned with regards to truth functional logic. So we're going to master those two, and that will be the first 7 weeks, really working through that stuff. Then in the second half of the course, what we're going to do is think a little bit about what's sometimes called the philosophy of logic. So really here the idea is to think about what are some of the underlying notions and concepts that support or fall out from the formal logic systems that we've developed. So here we're going to think about things like reference, how do singular terms work, how do names pick out the objects that they do, notions about modality, so when must things be a certain way or when could they be different, and also some things about the nature of identity, both at a time and over time. So that's really the plan. The way we're going to kind of run this, because formal logic is a little bit like learning a foreign language or learning some mathematics, we're going to have both weekly lectures and tutorials. So the lectures will be in person. We'll also have backup recordings. They'll be available on YouTube and Panopto. You'll be able to find the links on the Canvas page. So the lectures are going to meet Wednesday afternoons, 2:45 to 4:30. Still kind of late in the day, but not quite as late. And then the tutorials, which is really where we'll get most of our work done, will be Fridays around midday. Now, the aim of the tutorials is for us to work through our homework material, to answer any questions you might have, to really kind of give us more space to have proper kind of Q&A and talk through stuff that we don't get to cover in the lectures. It's worth noting, right, that this is the kind of general plan. Things might change depending on the week and my availability and things like this. So always be sure to check my timetable. And you can find that through the Canvas page. Notably, right, we'll also be moving around in terms of rooms quite a bit because the schedulers love us. Just have to keep in contact with that. With regards to attendance, it is not at all mandatory, but it is strongly encouraged, especially with regards to tutorials, and especially in the first half of the course. When we're working through the formal logic, really, again, the tutorials are where we're going to get most of the work done, so I would really strongly encourage you to be there. Notably, I'm not going to take attendance or anything like that. I've got better things to do with my time. I'm sure you do too. So that's the rough and ready pragmatics. Let's talk about assessment. You're probably wondering, how is your grade going to be determined? So basically, there's 3 mechanisms for assessment here. There's homework assignments, there's a midterm exam, and there's a final exam. Really, what matters here is points, because points make prizes. So there's 100 points going, and your grade is going to be determined by your score out of the 100 possible points. Specifically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your score, right, I'm going to divide it by 10 and then round to the nearest 0.5. That gives me your grade. To pass the class, you need at least 55 points or more. So, notably what this means, and also I should say, I don't care where the points come from. There's not a minimum score for any mode of assessment. So what this means is that in theory, right, you could absolutely ace the midterm exam, get 40 out of 40 for the midterm, do all the homework, you got 60 points, whang bang, you've passed. You can get a 0 on the final if you want. Not that I encourage that at all, but again, it just kind of gives you a grip on how the assessment here goes. So there's 20 possible points going for homework assignments. There'll be 40 points for the midterm exam and 40 points for the final exam. Notably, there are, of course, resits for the midterm and the final. They'll be separate. They'll be worth the same as the relevant exams, be structured in the exact same kind of way. More on that in just a moment. So let's first talk about the assignments. So assignments are broadly going to be broken down into two types. The first half of the course, when we're really working on the formal logic, is going to be self-corrected questions from our textbook. Our textbook is a free open source bit. It's on the Canvas page. You'll be able to see it. Notably, as well as asking you to do some assignments from the textbook, I've also given you a solutions book. The solutions book has, shock horror, the solutions to the exercises. So what this actually means is that I'd like you, instead of just doing the assignments, but to also self-correct your assignments. So to get the full score for each homework assignment, what you need to do is answer all the questions, compare your answers to the sample answers in the solutions book, and if you got it wrong, mark that it was wrong and mark how you could have fixed it. So what this means is that assignments basically are worth anywhere, well, they can be either 0, 1, or 2 points. You get 2 points if you do all the questions and you self-correct it. You get 1 point if you only do some of the questions or you don't self-correct it. And you get 0, well, if you don't submit anything. So that's the first half, will be these self-corrected questions from our logic textbook. The second half of the course, when we move to more philosophy of logic, what I'll have you do is ask you to write response pieces. So I'll give you a few questions. These are usually quite short. You really only need to write something like a paragraph or so. And I'll ask you to answer those. They'll be done in much the same way. I'll provide some sample answers afterwards and things like this. We'll talk through them in the tutorials. Notably, the kinds of questions that will be in these response pieces and these writing assignments are going to be very similar to the questions I'm going to face on the final exam. So in this way, the assignments are always setting you up to be prepared for the exam to come. So let's talk about the exams. There's 2 exams. As I said, there's a midterm and a final. They're both worth 40 points each. The exams will always be composed of questions that are similar to the stuff we've done in the assignments, in the homework. The midterm, which will take place in mid-October, it will be just on the material in the first half of the course. So it'll be on things like symbolizing informal logic, constructing truth tables, building interpretations, all things we'll talk about in the first 7 weeks. Then we'll put that aside. We'll pivot to the second set of topics. And here the exam will be these open kind of questions that we've been doing in the response pieces in the assignment. Again, in every time, every case, you will have seen the kinds of questions you're going to get on the exams. I'll also make available older versions of them so you can see them. You'll be prepared. We'll have review lectures and meetings. No worries to stress. I don't know the dates for these yet, but as soon as I do, I'll let you know. I'll post them on Canvas and, of course, mention them again as we get closer to the day. So that's broadly the assessments. There's assignments, which will ask you frequently to do self-correcting, or when we move to the second half, just write your response pieces. And there's the 2 exams. We'll get more about those details as they come along, but hopefully that's clear. So as I mentioned, the kind of broad plan is 2 parts. The first half is really just on what we might think of as the syntax and semantics of our 2 formal languages. So we'll be working on things like symbolization, going from natural language, like English, into our formal language, possibly back. And then in the second half of the course, we're going to think about philosophical issues that stem from formal logic. Specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about notions of ontological commitment and quantification, set theory, possible worlds as notions to account for modality, the notion or the nature of properties, how reference works, and then finally we'll wrap up by talking about identity, how it's a little bit weird and what sort of properties it has and things like this. So that's really the plan. Notably, you can see more details about all of these on the syllabus. The syllabus also lists what readings there are to do each week. Please make sure to read everything for the relevant lecture before the lecture. And I want to kind of just wrap up a little bit by, talking a little bit about what to look forward to. I guess the first thing to say here is, if you have any accessibility issues, let me know ASAP. Right? If there's problems with getting to lecture, or you can't open the PDFs or something like that, let me know. Very happy to help. Right? We'll sort something out and we'll find some way to make these things work. I want to stress, formal logic and logic generally is quite hard. Right? It is. It's especially difficult because, quite frankly, it's fundamentally different than a lot of the things that you'll be doing in the rest of your time in the philosophy degree. But that's okay, right? Don't be discouraged by the fact that it's difficult. We're in this together. We're going to work through it together. I'm here to help you. You guys can all work together. Right? This is actually really fun. To get to my last point, I want to just say, logic is hard, but it also is it can be really fun and rewarding, as long as you're kind of willing to put the work in. And notably, right, again, I'm here to help. If you have any questions, if you're struggling, any issues at all, shoot me an email. You can message me on Canvas. There's also Canvas Chat, which is sort of a weird kind of Discord thing. It's there. I don't think anyone has ever used it ever, but it is technically there if you want to get a hold of me that way. Yeah, I'm here to help. And this can actually be a really, really fun course. I promise you. It's super fun. Like once it all kind of clicks, it's amazing. I love teaching this class, and so that's broadly everything I wanted to say. You can hear my dog barking in the background there because I tapped the table. She thinks someone's knocking on the door. The last bit I wanted to finish off on is just to say what we'll cover in lecture 1. So the actual first lecture is going to be a kind of introduction to what logic is, especially what formal logic is. I'll give you a little bit of a sales pitch as to why I think it's so important, especially for philosophers, to study this kind of thing. We'll get introduced to our main notion of validity, which is really going to be our kind of stalking horse for the whole 7 weeks of the course, or at least the first 7 weeks of the course. And we'll get started in our basic symbolizing in our first formal language, which is truth functional logic. So I'll ask you, please read the first 14 pages of For All X that's on the Canvas page. Note that our first meeting is on a weird day and time, because I'm unfortunately going to be away at a conference on our normal time. So our first lecture is actually going to be meeting Friday the 1st of September at 10:45. Again, check my timetable, make sure you're all prepped. If you have any questions about this course, feel free to shoot me an email and everything. That's basically it. Thank you guys very much for listening, and I really look forward to meeting you all in person very soon. All right, bye.